The Tuesday, May 8th, 2018 regular meeting of the Planning Commission will now be called to order. Could we please have a roll call?
Commissioner Gomez.
Here.
Commissioner Gooding.
Here.
Commissioner Mackin.
Here.
Commissioner Sayasan.
Here.
Let the record show Commissioner Patel is absent.
Thank you. Could we have a motion to adopt tonight's agenda, please?
I move to adopt the agenda for tonight.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed? Motion carries for adoption of the agenda. The consent calendar. And the consent calendar item for tonight is the approval of the draft action minutes of April 10, 2018. Is there anyone who would like that removed from tonight's agenda? Seeing no one, could we have a motion to adopt the consent calendar, please?
I'll move to adopt the consent calendar.
Second?
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries to adopt the consent calendar. Oral communications is an opportunity for anyone here who would like to speak on an item that is not on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone who would wish to address the commission? Seeing no one, we'll move on. Written communications. We have an advisory here from the Brisbane Baylands Advisory Group regarding a meeting Tuesday, May 15th. Tonight, under new business, we have a public hearing. It's regarding use permit UP-2-18 for 7,000 Marina Boulevard. Could we have a staff report, please?
Yes, thank you. I'll dim the lights here. The applicant requests Planning Commission approval of a use permit to modify the parking regulations for 7,000 Marina Boulevard. The request is specifically to reduce the number of parking spaces required from 268 to 245. By way of background, the approximately 105,000 square foot building was built in 1986 as an administrative office headquarters for Dakin, but it has been vacant since 2011. In 2014, the Planning Commission approved a design permit for exterior changes to the building, and that work was completed in 2016. And largely the building is as you see it here, with a minor modification on the right-hand side for an enclosure that I'll mention later. The current proposal is to convert the building from administrative office space to headquarters for Sangamo Therapeutics, a research and development company. Modifications are proposed to allow the company to establish both R&D lab space along with their company's administrative offices. The proposed R&D use is permitted by right in this commercial zoning district, so the use permit is just to modify the parking standards for the site. The reason for this request is that the introduction of R&D uses requires more robust building utilities than a typical office would require. In order to accommodate these needs, the applicant is proposing to convert the basement level parking to utilities and storage areas. Additionally, an enclosure to accommodate a backup generator and to replace the existing trash and recycling area would be placed on the eastern corner of the building. And that's what I just mentioned on the right-hand side of the screen there. Both of these changes would take away some of the existing parking. The proposal is also to add approximately 4,600 square feet of collaboration meeting space at the second level of the building's 5-story atrium. Note that none of the proposed improvements would change the building facade or change the traffic circulation on the site. A few notes on the parking standards before we get into the specifics on Sangamo's proposal. Parking standards are established under the zoning based on generic categories of building use, such as retail, office, warehousing, light fabrication, and so on. For example, Brisbane administrative office uses require one space for every 300 square feet of building floor area, as is the case in this building. While industrial uses such as light fabrication, warehousing, is one space to 1,000 square feet. Generally, the broad application of these standards across the various business sectors and land uses is effective in addressing the needs of both the business and community by ensuring that parking meets the user's need as well as it does not spill over into the broader community. However, this one-size-fits-all approach may not reflect the parking needs of every business. Thus, the code allows for Planning Commission to modify the standards on a site-specific basis through this use permit process. Broadly speaking, Sangamo's proposal would result in conversion of about 18,000 square feet of office space into R&D and lab pilot plant space, while approximately 57,000 square feet would remain as administrative office space, and another 18,000 square feet would be in storage and utilities on the basement level. Whoop. There we go. Since the parking regulations do not include specific R&D parking standards, the R&D portion is counted together with the administrative office at one space for every 300 square feet of building floor area. That is, except for the basement level, which would be at 1 to 1,000 as it's storage and utilities at that level. So adding up these spaces under the city's code would result in that 268 space requirement. The point has been made to the city that R&D is fundamentally different from traditional office. For example, R&D lab spaces devote substantial area to work benches and equipment, which limits the number of employees who might occupy a given space as compared to conventional office. Additionally, individual R&D employees may utilize both lab and office spaces, but they can't be in both spaces at the same time. These factors would suggest that the application of the 1 to 300 square feet standard would result in very conservative parking requirements. Staff surveyed the parking standards of several other cities in San Mateo County, and a table showing those standards was attached with your agenda report. Generally, the parking standards for R&D uses for these other cities was found in the range of 1 to 500 square feet up to one space to 800 square feet in building floor area. Applying even the 1 to 500 square feet to the R&D portion, leaving the admin portion as it is, would yield conforming parking for this proposal. Then more specifically on this proposal, Sangamo provided existing and projected staffing headcounts, which you see here, along with their estimated percentages of single vehicle and alternative travel mode usages. Projecting out to next year, 2019, as well as to 2022, the headcounts went from 136 to 264 individuals. If each person drove a single occupancy vehicle, it appears that the parking would become constrained by year 2022. However, Sangamo also estimates that the parking space demand would total approximately 67% of the employee headcount. That's based on their estimate of 63% driving alone, or a one-to-one demand for those, and the other employees would utilize other means, carpools or other transportation modes. That would slightly add to the parking demand for just another 4%. At the 2022 projection, that would result in a parking demand of 177 spaces, as you see on the bottom of this slide. So that's still 68 spaces under their proposed maximum capacity of 245. To help achieve the lower parking demand, Sangamo has prepared a Transportation Demand Management Plan, or TDM plan. In brief, TDMs are aimed at maximizing utilization of existing transportation resources to reduce traffic congestion, air pollution, and parking demand. A few notes on TDMs. Sierra Point has both existing shuttle service and bicycle connections to encourage alternate modes of travel. The company has also indicated that they will have an employee shuttle. The building will also include showers and changing facilities to encourage bicycle commuting. In summary, staff believes that the site will have sufficient parking as proposed by the applicant to accommodate Sangamo's needs. Also, this application has been routed to the various city departments and outside agencies that might have an interest in the proposal, and no objections were raised, nor have any been raised by the community at this point. And finally, on findings, specific findings for the Planning Commission's granting of a use permit for parking modification were discussed in the agenda report, and the proposal meets all of the findings. Note especially that consistent with the general plan policies that speak to establishing a mix of uses, maintaining and diversifying the city's tax base, this proposal would allow the proposed R&D use to be established on the site, which has gone vacant for the last 7 years. And parking modifications would not have detrimental effects or negatively impact other properties, and strict enforcement of the parking regulations is not necessary, nor it is reasonably feasible given the site constraints on this already developed site. So in closing, staff recommends approval of use permit UP 218 to modify the parking standards for this site to 245 spaces. And that's via adoption of the resolution, which contains the complete findings and conditions of approval.
Thank you, Ken. Commissioner Saison, would you like to start? Do you have any questions for staff?
No questions for staff, but maybe some for the applicant.
Okay, we'll hold on that. Commissioner Gomez.
Yeah, just, and I didn't, in reviewing the document over the weekend, thank you for preparing this, by the way. It was very thorough, and I'm quite interested in this relocation to Brisbane for Sangamo. I did have a question around how we were looking at electric vehicle like infrastructure, like charging infrastructure for developments as they're coming. As I just saw, the shopping center here just deployed that, and I'm just thinking around transportation and air quality and our sustainability plan within the city and so forth. So I'm just curious, is that in the TDM somewhere?
It's actually a separate requirement from TDM, so
Okay.
it is
Okay.
a requirement for the site, and they do have, if I remember correct, it's 22. The applicant, correct me if I'm wrong on that number, but it's a requirement in the parking ordinance, and they
So
have met that aspect.
So it is within the code. Okay. Thank you. That helps clarify.
Commissioner Gooding?
I think this is a question for staff rather than for the applicant, but in going out there and looking around, you're right, the site is constrained. It is sort of one contiguous site, and there are other buildings with other parking. In the unlikely event that the estimate is conservative and their head count goes up and their use goes up, where does the overflow go? Is there any provision for it or anticipation of where it would go?
I think the first course of action for Sangamo would to be even more proactive in utilizing their TDM measures, more active in getting carpools going internally, and I think as a general trend, we're seeing more and more people going to alternative modes of transportation. So I think they've projected it out pretty far and still have a good margin of error there. But there's not street parking. There is parking next door. Essentially, to the east is the city's marina parking lot,
Right.
which if they were to go to that, they would actually have to ask city council for approval as a separate approval down the road if they had to. That would be a last resort, I would say.
Yeah, my observation is that parking lot is pretty underutilized, so it probably wouldn't be a horrible thing to have to deal with in that event.
Right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I have a question, and for anyone watching at home, TDM plan is Transportation Demand Management Plan. It's called a Trip Reduction Plan, and it's to achieve lower parking demand. The study that was done, it's important, I think, to note the fact that these are projections, and the actual composition of the workforce could change ongoing. It's also noted in the material we were given that the City of Brisbane will do an administrative review of the TDM plan along with the City and County Association of Governments. So my question is there any mechanism for ongoing review of statistics from companies and their TDM plans? And if so, how frequently? But before you answer that, what if a company's expansion exceeds expectations? So my point is this: it seems like a periodic review of the TDMs would be valuable as a point of data collection for the city, in that it would analyze commute patterns, assess the adequacy of existing roadways. It could actually help us advocate for increased public transit within the county, which is something that the city could do on behalf of the business community. And also potentially establish shuttles, maybe in collaboration with the business community and neighboring cities. So
Sorry. So the code doesn't have a trigger essentially for reviewing the TDM measures. I think this is largely a self-monitoring program once it's in place, and I should.
And that Ken's absolutely correct, but certainly as part of your latitude or discretion in granting this use permit, you could certainly make that a requirement, that it's maybe once every 2 years. That seems reasonable. I don't know that a yearly TDM report would, I think every 2 years would probably suffice, but that would be something the commission could add if that's your wish.
I think staff's recommendations would be important there, because the whole goal here would not be to make more work for an employer, but more importantly, the business community. It's a collaboration, and the city can certainly serve the business community and the residents in a lot of ways, and this just seems like one where we could actually do something good here. And if it's not there, maybe it's time to consider that. So thank you very much. So we will open the public hearing now, and is the applicant here? Would you like to address the commission tonight? And if there's someone here, if you could step to the podium, identify yourself.
Good evening.
Hello.
Good evening. I'm
evening.
Sandy McRae. I'm the CEO of Sangamo, and I have my CFO and my head of facilities and a team of architects, it seems, that have joined us tonight. We are very excited to move here. We're currently in Point Richmond, in a beautiful industrial set of train tracks, and we see the move to Brisbane as allowing us to recruit more easily from a pool of talent that are in many of the other biotech and pharma companies that are in this area. We love the building. We think it's a very beautiful building and a unique one, and we want to look after it and respect the area around it. So as part of that, we need to find a solution to move our staff between the two sites. So your request about the TDM is not simply to address a parking question from the council, but to keep our family together and to allow them to go between. So we're spending, I think it's 1.2 million we're predicting a year to set up a shuttle system and to encourage carpooling for our staff between the two sites. And so in that, I think we're not only following the letter of the law, but the spirit of what it is you're trying to achieve.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else from your company that would like to address the commission? No? Okay, if you could just maybe stay there for one moment. Come on back. Commissioner Gomez, do you have any questions for the applicant?
Just point of clarity. So you'll keep the location in Point Richmond and operate here and move brains back and forth?
We've been in Point Richmond for 20 years.
Wow. Okay.
And so our research family has grown up there.
Okay.
And their families are there.
Got it.
And we found
Makes
it was
sense.
just impossible to ask them to move.
Yeah.
So that'll be our main research site. And
Okay.
this will be our global headquarters.
Yeah.
And it will also have research and a manufacturing facility.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Exciting.
Commissioner Syson?
Yeah, I just had one question. So, your plan indicates you're gonna remove 13 surface parking spaces to put in a utility yard, enclosure and an electrical transformer there?
Mm-hmm.
So is that gonna be within the existing parking space?
Yes.
Okay. Can you describe for me, I mean, how's that gonna look like? I'm just a little concerned about potential noise issues or the
So
aesthetics.
I think that's a good point, and I would ask my experts to talk to that.
Yeah, and for the visual, if you wanted to go to the image of the building, we could do that.
Could you state your name, please?
Yeah, Mike Wilson with CRB Architect. So the right side of that is going to be a utility screen wall with landscaping that kind of grows up onto it. And so that would be, there's actually a roof over that, also portions of it, so that would help also with the noise transmission to the exterior. And we're also quite a distance away from any of the additional property lines where we have the parking between that. But as you can see, we're trying to blend in the utility yard with the existing facility. So it'll be tucked up against to the building, and it does take up some existing parking spaces.
So it's gonna be completely enclosed?
It's not completely enclosed.
Okay.
There's a portion of it that's roofed.
Okay,
So
okay.
Is that all?
Mhm.
Okay. Commissioner Gooding?
I wasn't clear from reading the materials. I think I missed it. Is there also underground parking under the building here?
So there's an existing basement level that is underground parking today.
Okay.
We're proposing that the proposal is for the parking that's there would actually just be eliminated, and that becomes utility zones for air handlers and other utilities that serve the manufacturing and the R&D facility. That's kind of the reason for eliminating the parking in that basement level. And then it keeps those utilities within the building and not pushing more to the roof or outside.
So the elimination of that and a few out here in the parking lot is a total of 23 reductions, is that it?
From what's required for the building, yes. I think there's 25 existing in the basement level right now, so we're reducing by more, but the parking requirement isn't the same as for the office, so it offsets a little bit.
So what is the total amount of parking spaces eliminated, counting the underground and the outside?
I think it's, if I remember correctly, it's right around 38, somewhere in that range.
And lastly, I think you estimate something like 67% of your head count would wind up occupying a parking place, essentially, is the way I read it. So
Yeah.
how do you get those figures? What's the basis for those estimates or assumptions?
So that was the TDM report that was done by, I forget the name. You want to talk to that?
Could you state your name for the record, please?
Hi, my name is Kathy Yee, CFO of Sangamo Therapeutics. We did a detailed survey of our employee base and asked them directly if we were asked to, essentially, your job moves from Point Richmond to Brisbane, and there are different modes of transportation. What would you do? What paths you would take? And in fact, we're actually providing, if you're driving, less, but if you are taking public transportation, $260 a month to encourage people to take public transportation. And we will supply shuttles between BART or the ferry station back to our building. So we did a detailed employee survey. It wasn't just an estimate of what we think it should be.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions?
No.
No, I have none of the applicant. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Is there any member of the public who would like to speak? Seeing none, could I have a motion to close public hearing?
I'll move to close public hearing.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No. Okay. Discussion. Commissioners. Commissioner Gooding, would you like to start?
I don't really have any additional comments. I mean, the staff findings seem, I don't see anything wrong or anything highlighted that gives me too much concern. It's a pretty open site. It's hard to really gauge what's going to happen 5, 6, 7 years out because the building's been vacant for so long. We don't have a lot of recent track record for it. that's of, mild concern only because it's an absence of data. But I don't see anything particularly flawed or doubtful about the data we do have.
Thank you. Commissioner Saison.
No, I mean, I don't really have any concerns regarding the reduced parking space. I think they made a good case for, that this won't negatively impact traffic, and, I think what they did with their employee survey, and I think, that probably address, the concerns that someone would have about it. So I think I'm good with it.
Thank you. Commissioner Gomez?
Yeah, nothing more to add. I think not having all the data leads us into a situation where if they do grow, we might have to revisit this down the line. I'm familiar with a lot of the tech sites in the South Bay that do have challenges, and they've had to implement their own valet system and to manage parking flow. But that's so many years out. I think we'd just be spinning to debate that at this point. So that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to circle back to bring up the idea of potentially asking for a TDM study biannually. And I'm just wondering what the rest of the commissioners think of that.
I agree. I'm in favor of some kind of requirement or condition of a survey. The frequency of it is, I have no magic number for what that is. It's no more frequently than 2 years, but maybe even 3 years. I don't know. If their figures are correct, it's not even remotely an issue until 2022, which is 4 years out. So, conceivably something like the first one being not until 3 or 4 years out, and then biannually or something like that, because these do take time and money and expense. If there's, if there's no anticipation of a problem, then there's no reason to impose it right away, perhaps.
Okay. Staff, could you comment on that? What do we see? What do we foresee in the area? Because we have more and more projects that have gone before planning and that are anticipated at Sierra Point.
Certainly at Sierra Point, but I think, the question is kind of a standalone issue on, will they hit their projections and their targets? And I don't know, I wouldn't speak for them, but typically larger firms will have someone in the office who's coordinating this kind of data collection. I don't see it to be a terribly onerous task, but I think, as indicated here, we certainly aren't approaching the threshold of when they might have demand for several years. So, again, I really defer to the commission. I don't object to putting it off till 3 years, past occupancy or more, if that's your desire, and every 2 years, beyond that or something, until we reach a point where we're comfortable that things have sort of leveled off or stabilized and there aren't any dramatic changes in the operations. So I really do defer to what the commission would like.
So if perhaps we could revise this to say another TDM in 3 years after occupancy with
we won't be asking for another TDM. All we're doing is basically an analysis of the effectiveness of their TDM.
Oh, okay.
That's really what we're looking for. They made certain projections and assumptions in terms of how much trip reduction would occur. And I think that's really the goal here, is to make sure that they're achieving something close to that trip reduction. I don't want them to remake the wheel in terms of doing
Right.
another study or another analysis. There may be conditions that change out there that trigger them to want to do that, and that's certainly understandable, and we'll work with them on that. But our expectation is to be more of a, this is what you projected, this is what we understood it to be, what are the actual results, and any, wherever you want to slice the time, that's what we'd be asking for.
Okay. And Commissioner Saison, input?
Yeah, I'm fine for looking at this 3 or 4 years out, and then 2 years after that.
Okay.
So.
Commissioner Gomez?
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable request. I would caution that we don't want to just create a lot of administrative additional work. That's where my only trepidation would be. But I see the value of the data. I would love to just understand in the county if any other cities have approached any of the bigger developments and tried to analyze the TDM a few years in to see what that the efficacy, right? I think you brought that up, John, that doesn't seem like that's a regular practice, and I'm not a fan of creating a lot of additional administrative work, but I think it would be helpful to understand. I mean, honestly, I think it's a good problem economically, I think, to have if this parking lot is fully piled up, so I think but this is a healthy discussion at the end of the day, and I think that's a reasonable request.
Okay. So at this point, if we're in agreement, I would entertain a motion, and if that could perhaps incorporate the one detail on revisiting the efficacy of the TDM. Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll move to adopt the use permit as applied with only one additional condition, that the applicant provide to the planning department how to phrase this correctly, a review of the efficacy of their plan, beginning 3 years from occupancy, and then to be renewed on a biannual basis after that.
Okay. Do we have a second on that?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No. Okay, the motion passes regarding use permit UP-2-18. Thank you very much. Good luck to you.
Welcome.
And welcome, yes, thank you. Glad to have you here. Okay, so we're moving on. Items initiated by staff?
Just have a couple items. One is to remind the commission about, I guess 3 things. First is, we had a discussion at the last meeting about possibly changing back to Thursday meetings. And we reviewed the schedule and the calendar for both the council's upcoming meetings and the availability of this room. So I think we could make that change starting in July, if that's the commission's pleasure, and we'd bring back amendment to your rules to reflect that. So if that's, I don't need a formal sort of action, but if that generally seems like that's something that's going to be acceptable, we'll bring back a set of revised rules starting in July, then changing the.
Okay, thank you. Any further commissioners' input on this? Because it seemed like our last meeting we had discussion and it didn't seem to be a problem. Do we have any second thoughts? No? Okay.
Not at all.
Please.
If that makes life easier for staff, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter to me at all.
And then the follow-up to that is, again, summer schedule. If people have vacations planned or issues where their availability be limited in the summer, that would be good to know. We'll send out you a list of prospective meeting dates based on this change. And just if you could just email staff back, Alberto, and so we'll make sure we're good with the quorum for upcoming meetings and plan accordingly for the summer. And then the other thing I had was the next meeting on the 22nd. We'll start with some of the training we're planning on doing in a workshop setting. So my thought is we could do that we could either do it in advance of the regular meeting, or if commissioners are available early. If that doesn't work, we're going to have a very limited business agenda for the next meeting, so we could adjourn after we do the business and adjourn to the large conference room for a workshop, if that's your pleasure. Just want to take your temperature on start time and which approach you're more comfortable with.
If I may offer some input there, I do know Commissioner Patel deals with ongoing traffic to be here, and moving that meeting earlier, I think, is going to be a hardship for him. Anyone else? Meeting time?
I should be all right. Yeah.
So if I might suggest, perhaps if it's not a large project that we're looking at next meeting, to do a workshop after the meeting. Okay.
And that is all I had.
Okay. Thank you very much. Do we have any items initiated by the commission? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion for adjournment to the next regular meeting of May 22nd, 2018 at 7:30. Is there a motion?
I make a motion to
Adjourn.
adjourn the meeting.
And a second?
I'll second. Oh,
Oh, good, we've got 2 seconds. All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, I got a mental freeze there. I thought, am I saying that I approve that we have the next meeting scheduled, or am I adjourning the meeting?